All right. Hello, fraud fighters. Welcome to the next session, Institutional Strategies for Protecting Consumers from Sextortion. And we have a really great session for you today. Before I turn it over to the people that you actually want to hear from, a few housekeeping items. My name is Chris Worley. I'm head of marketing here at Unit 21. This session is going to be recorded, and it's also available on this page immediately after this session concludes. So if you have colleagues or if you had to step away and you really wanted to catch a certain part, just know you can come right back in here. You can share this link. It's going to be available straight away. And because these sessions are 30 minutes, we won't have a dedicated Q&A at the end. However, if you look to the right, you see a little Q&A button. Smash that, drop in any of your questions. We've got Unit 21 people here to answer some of those questions as they come up. So don't be shy and make it interactive through that chat. And without any further ado, I have the distinct privilege of introducing Trisha, the CEO of Unit 21.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm Trisha, founder and CEO of Unit 21. Really excited to have Paul here. Paul, welcome. Paul, can you briefly introduce yourself to the audience today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I've been an intelligence analyst for the past 10 years. Started out my career tracking ISIS on social media, and more recently have been focused on cyber crimes, financial fraud, and corporate security.
That's amazing. And Paul has done some amazing work on untackling sextortion. And we're really excited to dive into that in the session today. So to just take a step back on why did we, as Unit 21, decide to pick sextortion as a topic for the Fraud Fighters Virtual Summit. Sextortion is one of the fastest growing cybercrimes in the US. From 2022 to 2023 itself, there were 2,300 sextortion cases that came into the Cybercrime Center. But from October 2023 to today, so less than a year in, there's been 8,000. So it's grown from 2,300 to 8,000 in under 2 years. And it is, the impact on society is really incredible. Over 34 teenage suicides in the last 24 months have been reported as per one of Paul, your LinkedIn post. So this is a really important topic for our society. It is a very big reason that we decided to start Unit 21 is for solving crimes that prevent justice and safety in the world. But we're really excited to have Paul here today to educate us more about this topic, to shed light more into his experience in unraveling some of these heinous crimes. So, Paul, maybe to get us started, can you define sextortion for our audience and what it is?
Yeah, so what we're talking about today is financially motivated sexual extortion. Previously, sextortion, was looked at as revenge porn or being used as leverage against a former lover, typically in an intimate relationship with someone. Nowadays, it's been a scam. Scammers from across the world have been able to trap lots of teens and lots of young adults into this sort of scam by coercing them into sending compromising photos. They use very convincing catfish accounts. And then at the end of the day, as soon as that photo is sent, they're blackmailing a lot of Americans, a lot of Canadians, a lot of Australians for money. So yeah, this crime, unfortunately, is an extremely terrible crime. It involves, blackmail, threats, sexual exploitation. A lot of it is targeting minors. And there have been, like you mentioned, tragic results. Unfortunately, the suicide count of just teens alone is up to 39 now. You mentioned 34, and that was the number just a couple of weeks ago. And this crime is targeting every neighborhood in America, in Canada, in the Western world right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is really horrible, and the impact on the youth especially is really understated. I'm curious, what are you've studied this tremendously. What are some of the most common methods that you're seeing perpetrators use to engage in sextortion?
Yeah, the most common pathway that we see for these perpetrators is typically they have an Instagram account and they're flooding friend requests into various high schools, sports teams, and their Instagram account is, a nice, beautiful teen girl or young woman, and they try to trap as many, potential friends and followers as they can from Instagram. They're targeting a lot of high school sports teams, to make it look like they have 15 mutual followers, 15 mutual friends in common with potential targets they're reaching out to. Then the conversation begins just as a normal conversation. Hey, what's up? And then it turns quickly flirtatious. At that point, typically the scammers will either, stay on Instagram or move to an app like Snapchat, where users think, if they're going to exchange photos with this person, they will just disappear. Unfortunately, as the conversation turns even more flirtatious, the scammer themselves will actually send a nude photo first, and then convince and coerce their targets into returning a similar photo. So as soon as that happens, then they demand money. They say, hey, I have your nudes. I've screenshotted all your friends, your followers, where you go to school. I'm going to start spreading this photo immediately unless you pay me $300. They ask for these payments over Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, all the peer-to-peer transaction sites. We also see quite a bit of crypto being used in these sorts of scams as well.
That's really horrible. What I find really interesting in what you talked about is that they create a component of trust by sending their own nude photo first, and that makes it much more of a believable scam for victims to become unfortunately a prey to. I'm curious, where do you find these scammers often located? Who are these groups that are doing this?
Yeah, so almost all of the financial sextortion today that's targeting minors is linking back to West Africa, specifically Nigeria, and specifically a disorganized cybercrime group or collective called the Yahoo Boys. Now, this is different because they aren't all, sitting in a call center all together doing this scam. They're a very distributed network, loosely connected. And what they do is they share their, scripts and methods and formats online in their own groups. Oftentimes they're public Facebook groups. You could look on Facebook right now for Yahoo formats, and you see all the scams that they're running, and they're trying to sell their different scripts that they use. Yeah. So we really started to look at this crime and all these suicides that were popping up around the nation, not as individual cases, but hey, this is basically organized crime. Yeah. My research was really the first one to put the name to the group and say, hey, these are the perpetrators overseas that are doing the lion's share of the sextortion targeting minors. I mentioned Nigeria, but we also see big clusters of this happening in the Ivory Coast as well as the Philippines. Philippines sextortion scammers typically do target adult men. However, incidentally, they'll sometimes get a 16 or 17-year-old as well.
Yeah. Yeah, what I find really fascinating about sextortion is that in many ways the crime is very old in terms of, emotionally blackmailing and sexually blackmailing. What is interesting is that now it can be done because of social engineering across the world. And so there is someone from West Africa who was talking to a teenage kid in Ohio, and unfortunately getting them to extract money for, or in the situation where they don't extract money, then the teen may or may not take their life. So this is really interesting that things have changed. I'm curious, why do you think it is rising to the degree that it is rising today? 2,300 to 8,000 in 1 year is insane, and it's almost unheard of, this type of growth rate in any type of crime.
Yeah, that's just the FBI numbers. Wait until you hear about the numbers from NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So back in 2021, there were only 139 reported cases of financial sextortion targeting minors. Fast forward to 2023, that number was over 26,000.
That's insane.
So that's an 18,000% increase within that 2-year time frame from 2021 to 2023. The reason for this is these Yahoo boys, the criminals typically in Nigeria who are doing the scam now, back in 2022, they started circulating sextortion. They call it their blackmailing format as part of their kind of scam kits and their scam repertoires that they would trade amongst each other. These Yahoo boys are the same ones who did the Nigerian prince email scams 20 years ago. They're going to send their inheritance to you and you just have to pay that advance fee. They've evolved. They've used different romance scams, impersonation scams, crypto scams, celebrity scams. And now the one that's making them a whole lot of money very quickly is financial sextortion. We found that they were circulating their scripts, their how-to guides. They're literally publishing how-to sextort minors openly on YouTube, in Facebook groups, on Scribd, on Instagram, on TikTok. These criminals, they think they're never going to get caught, so they're even sharing these on their personal accounts with their own faces.
Yeah, that's so horrible, but it's so crazy that this is the blasé nature of the whole activity, where the criminals are just posting these how to get $500 or $1,500 from a teenage kid in San Francisco, and we see that across. The one interesting thing about fraud is no matter what the type of fraud, there are some components that are the same. The first is, of course, you need to create some component of trust with the victim, and the other commonality I'm seeing is that, and we recently did a check fraud release, and there are a lot of like how to gain money through check fraud, YouTube videos that are created, and they're still there, and people can learn and take a course on it, just like you take a course on how to learn Python or something like that. So it's really ridiculous that it's come to this stage. I'm curious as to, you mentioned that it's in a little over 10 years, it's grown from 139 to 26,000. I'm curious, who are the most vulnerable groups today to sextortion, and why do you think they are particularly at risk?
The group that's most targeted today with financial sextortion are boys, typically age 13 to 17, although we've seen cases from age 10 to in their 60s. So it also targets females as well. But right now we're seeing about 90 to 95% of the financially motivated sextortion, at least targeting men. Whereas other perpetrators who are more sexually motivated or power motivated, they tend to target females. But with these financial cases, I think young boys and men has just been an untapped market for these scammers. They've already run their romance scams on every elderly and middle-aged person that they can find on Facebook, and now they've just moved to Instagram and Snapchat as this whole new vulnerable surface area. And these teens are more financially connected to the world now because they have things like Cash App and Venmo. So they are just a ripe target for scams.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate that that they're going after the youth who's so impressionable. And in the New York Times article where your research was quoted, they talk about how there is this component of the internet is forever. Like when this happens to a young person, they just have this feeling that my life is completely over. And in one case, within 23 minutes of this extortion attempt, the teen had taken their life. So I'm curious as to, you mentioned the Nigerian prince group, and it's really interesting. Since the release of ChatGPT, we have seen the proliferation of scams and different types of scams, romance scams, IRS scams, within our platform increase. And then the reason is that, with a Nigerian prince email, you could tell that it is potentially a scam. And then the reason is that there'll be spelling errors, there'll be punctuation mistakes, and it seems like a not fully believable story. But now, because of AI, the quality and sophistication of scams has only improved. I'm curious, what are you seeing in that, in the pattern and the script setup that the Yahoo boys are coming up with?
I mean, that is so true. These groups, not only are they using AI, but they also are using, American slang and vernacular and emojis that would make sense in an American context. So they
Yeah.
understand the kind of cultural components as well. So I would say these scam accounts, these catfish accounts, are more convincing than ever before. I look at some of them that are reported, and that's a real account. Why is this reported? And then I see, all right, actual evidence that it is a sextortion account. So the catfish accounts are extremely manipulative, and the other parts that we see with AI is that sometimes these victims, or the kid who's targeting or who's chatting with the scammer, will sometimes their spidey sense will go off, and some red flag, and they'll ask, hey, can you do a peace sign or a thumbs up, or they'll ask for some sort of verification so that they know that that person is real. And we've actually seen these criminals put the photos of the model that they're using into an AI system and say, all right, now make this model do a thumbs up, or whatever the kid is asking for verification so it seems real. In other cases of sextortion too, the criminal will try to elicit or coerce that nude photo from the victim. If that victim decides not to send it, they can still get blackmailed anyway. Some of these scammers are using the Nudify apps and the close off apps and those sorts of deepfake AI things, and removing the clothes from the victim's real Instagram photos, and then using that to blackmail them. They're going to send this embarrassing photo in an Instagram group chat with all their followers, unless if they get paid right now.
Yeah, that is really sad, because I mean, all of this is horrible, but that is, it's purely something that really should not be allowed, from at least an easy access of technology to create a nude image of any person that you can get a photo of the internet of. I'm So this is really interesting. I didn't really appreciate the degree that when the spidey senses go off, the kids are asking for some type of verification that they're human, and now with AI, it's seeming to be quite real. I'm curious, what have you found for, a lot of our audience, they work in the financial services industry and work in fraud prevention, anti-money laundering. What have you seen be effective strategies to detect um, this, and what can companies do to protect their customers from sextortion?
Really, really fantastic question. So I think there are things that the social media platforms can and should do. And like you mentioned, the financial institutions, because ultimately this is a financial crime. So I think there are some, different red flags or risk indicators that financial institutions can look for, especially if they're those peer-to-peer transaction services like Cash App or Venmo or PayPal. With those services, they can look at, US-based accounts or Westerner accounts. UK, Canada as well are also large targets of this scam. In some of these apps, there's actually, you can send messages to the other person, and they can detect if someone is sending a message that says, hey, send me, more money now, or else I'll leak your nudes. Like, those are certain words that should trigger some detection mechanism. The platforms can also look at money going from teen accounts in the US to, high-risk geographies. I mentioned Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and Philippines. Even if it's not sextortion, it's probably some other scam that's happening. Especially if we look at a teen account, especially male within that age bracket here in the US, if they liquidate their entire account and try to send it to one of those geographies, something suspicious is probably happening. There's some great research out there and work and ideas by Stacy Troop on LinkedIn. She also mentioned that, banks can look at $100 for a kid almost in the same way they look at $10,000 for an adult.
Yeah.
So if a kid suddenly starts sending large amounts to an account that has either, they've never transacted with before, that's definitely a red flag too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is really great. Pretty great list of red flags. I completely agree with you on $10,000 for an adult is not $10,000 for a kid, and you have to look at it differently. Um, I'm curious with respect to, so you mentioned there are two categories as financial services where we should be implementing these red flags, and this is something with Unit 21 we routinely look at as has a user emptied out a lot of their balance? Are they doing something unusual? Um, I'm curious on the social media side of things. One thing that I read was Snapchat conducted a survey of 1,000 teenagers and found that nearly half had been approached sexually across different social media by strangers, and nearly half of those who shared explicit pictures were met with sextortion attempts. So it's crazy. Like with just a random group of 1,000 teenagers, 500 are being approached. So what and you brought up this really interesting component where this is categorized as a financial crime, where ultimately it is about money that is being that's being extorted. But so social media companies are often not held liable for it because it is a financial crime. What responsibility, firstly, do you think social media companies have over this, and what can social media companies do to tackle this really growing, rapidly growing problem?
Well, the first thing you mentioned, I think, was liability. Social media platforms traditionally are not held liable by, user or criminal behavior on their platform because that's another third party user. It's not the platform. But there are certain things the companies are liable for, like building a safe product and building a product that has good privacy safeguards, etc. So one thing that, a couple things. Instagram can make teens, followers, and following lists always private by default. Right now, the moment that they accept a scammer's follow request, their entire social network, their followers list are exposed to that criminal. And that is the number one source of leverage in almost all of the financial sextortion targeting minors. As soon as the criminal gets that photo, they say, hey, I've screenshotted all your followers. I have your nudes. I'm going to send it to all of them unless you pay me right now. So Instagram can at least have a privacy option and have the default. So that way your entire friends list, your entire social circle isn't exposed the moment that you accept someone's follow request. There's things like platforms can classify the Yahoo Boys under their dangerous organizations policy. Right now, if you go on Facebook, there's dozens of public groups that say Yahoo blackmailing format. And there's tens of thousands of people in these groups of scammers who trade and share different scam methods. How is that allowed? So, the other thing is the criminals often use the same images and videos repeatedly, whether it's Instagram or Snapchat or other sites, doesn't matter. But platforms should be able to detect and say, hey, we've seen this image before in a sextortion attempt. Maybe we should not allow this image to be repeatedly used against potential victims.
Yeah, this is a really great. I really agree with you on while that might not be the typical BSA Act liabilities that financial institutions have for social media companies, there is other frameworks that they should be held accountable to. And I agree, some of these are it's crazy to me that it's not already implemented, especially the default privacy of privacy on option of just not showing your entire follower list to anyone who you're friends with. Uh, so thank you for sharing more about this. I'm curious. One of the something that has been talked about a lot recently was your job offer from Meta when as we're talking about social media companies. So can you share a little bit more about what role were you set on to take at Meta, and what happened?
Yeah, so a couple of months ago, after my research was published about the Yahoo Boys and sextortion and how they're using Instagram to commit this crime, one of my friends who worked at Meta got me a referral, suggested that I apply for a role. I applied for the role. It was to investigate human exploitation that's happening on Meta's services. Looking at the description, it was perfect. It was everything that I had been doing. And so I applied for the role, got interviews with the team. They all had read my research and they were all excited to bring me on board, as I was excited to, do more to combat this crime internally at a company, because I feel like you could do more when you're inside. At that time, I had accepted the offer. They had made a nice offer, and I accepted. But I was still employed with, or still affiliated with my previous organization, which was doing the research on financial sextortion. We had organized and hosted a very well-attended webinar that included parents of 4 of the victims of financial sextortion. It included the FBI, law enforcement agencies from around the world. It included folks from the social media platforms. Snap was there, Meta was there, Reddit, Discord, across the gamut. So we all came together to really learn about this new trending crime and what are the solutions to try to stop it. So we shined the spotlight on it, and we gave a voice to the parents of the victims here who are no longer with us. Moments after that webinar concluded, I got the phone call from my recruiter from Meta saying that my offer had been rescinded, with no further explanation given, aside from the fact that it was decided by a very much higher up person in the company under unusual circumstances. So, it seems to me that that's probably some sort of retaliation for just shining the spotlight on these sorts of crimes that are happening and the reasonable, practical things that they could do to stop it.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate to hear, but I'm really confident that your expertise is going to be incredibly valuable to the fraud community, fraud fighters community in general, as well as to whatever you do next. So on that vein, what has been the reaction from the fraud fighters community to this, as well as, how are you thinking of what's next for you?
Yeah, so the support from everyone has been fantastic. Lots of love, lots of support. And I just appreciate everyone who, backed me and, is continuing to stand by and combat this crime and try to implement some reasonable, practical ways to actually prevent this crime. It is preventable. So that's why I feel like there's hope to actually get some things done. It's just going to take a little time, I guess. What's next for me professionally? Stay tuned to find out on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. The work you have done is so important for humanity. I'm so happy that people like you exist in the world fighting the good fight. And this is a really interesting session that I feel like everyone should listen to. We've talked about so many interesting things, from AI and how AI is making sextortion even more of a rapidly growing threat in society. We've talked about what financial institutions can do, the types of rules that they can write in their platform to ensure that they're catching these types of criminal activities. And of course, what liability and responsibility social media companies have and what they can do. So thank you, Paul, for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Powerful and sobering insights for sure. Thanks everyone for joining us. Paul, thank you for the work you're doing and sharing your story. We're all rooting for you, and we're excited to see where your talents take you. I will be continuing to follow on LinkedIn for sure. All right. Well, in about 5 minutes, we have 3 more sessions you can choose from, and you've got some tough choices. You can attend ensuring the quality of your AML program. We've got some really great consultants who are going to share more about QA, QC, and how to be prepared for audits. Or you can stay on the scam track, and we've got a session all about authorized push payment fraud. Or there's a session on fintech trends, which, the debate that's roaring right now is fintech dead. Join the session, find out. You're not going to miss it. Also, if you want to learn more about fraud prevention with Unit 21, we have a really great demo set up that you can see Unit 21 available in action. It's available all day in our demo showcase. You can get there by clicking on the agenda. And Paul talked about red flags, risk indicators, and we can show you how you can deploy rules like that in minutes without relying on engineering resources or waiting for a vendor. And last but not least, we're going to be talking about this all day. You'll be sick of it, but we are in the midst of data gathering for our 3rd annual State of Fraud and AML report. It's another resource we publish for the community, like this Fraud Fighters Virtual Summit, and we're seeking to make this research the most informative yet. But we're unable to do so without publishing insights and your contribution. So scan the QR code. It'll only take about 5 minutes to complete. If you can just take 5 minutes today, that would be really wonderful. So with that, thank you all so much, and we'll see you at the next session. Bye, everyone.